Well, good afternoon, everybody. Brian Russell here. I'm your chapter Lunch and Learn coordinator. I'm happy to see that we've got almost 30 participants. We'll have a few more join us over the next few minutes typically. A little bit about logistics. So we will be monitoring the Q&A and the chat as well. During the presentation today, Raquel will have questions for the audience. So be sure and use the Q&A or chat to relay those questions, and then we'll be sure they get handed off to Raquel. And then towards the end of the presentation, Raquel will also have a time for Q&A, and we'd like to go on audio then for you to ask your questions, but just raise your hand, and then Dana will will activate your audio so you can ask the question. Looking for it to be interactive. So with that, let me do a quick intro for Raquel. Raquel Horta is joining us from Dublin, Ireland today, and she's going to present out on chaos to control. Raquel will have a little bit to share about, a little bit more about herself and her background. So with that, Raquel, I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon. I hope you are in the morning or afternoon. Here is good evening already. I'm thrilled really to have the opportunity to speak with you today. So my name is Raquel Horta, and I'm excited to share some insights on how to move from chaos to order. And the title could be, in a logical way, more from chaos to order, but I really wanted to highlight that sometimes it's not only about the order, it's how you feel in control when we have order in our project. So that's why it's from chaos to control. So thank you for being here. I hope you find this presentation engaging and informative. I hope we are ready to start. I cannot see you, so this is very strange. I will move on. A bit about me, you have it here. Most part of my career was really developing my project and program management skills. I also held roles around strategy, operations, and chief of staff. In beginning of this year, I decided to leave the corporate world to set a service company and to set my own coaching practice. And with coaching, I help project and program managers to overcome core challenges and become the confident and effective leaders that we as project managers should be. So this is a bit about myself. I don't spend too much time here on myself because I really want to deep dive on the agenda and on the topics that we are here to talk about today. And there are three main topics in the agenda or items of the agenda around the topic that we will discuss. And the first one is recognizing the sign of chaos. The second, mastering the shift from disorder to order. And then how do we prevent future chaos? As Brian was mentioning, I have some time aside for Q&A, but I really want to make this session interactive. So please, if you have questions in any part of the agenda, any part of the presentation, just raise your hand, and we will try to make these not bored to death with slides. So I will try to move between slides and a dashboard or a whiteboard where we can really see other things, because otherwise can be very boring. But as we know also, to move from chaos to order takes days, months, or even years. And right now we only have 1 hour to be together. So I'll try to be very concise. If there is something that you feel I can go or I go too fast, please stop me and I will go slowly, or ask me questions and I will try to clarify. I hope that's okay. So here is the point that I will move to a whiteboard. We will start by the topic and the item recognizing signs of chaos. Let me just stop sharing this one and share my whiteboard, which is a dark gray mural whiteboard. I hope you can see it. If you can see it, please just put it in the chat. Right now, I don't see even the chat. So please just say, okay, that's great. Thank you so much. I can see that you see it now. So before I write anything here, I want to ask you a question. If you could please add to the chat and write in the chat, what are the 3 main challenges you are facing in your projects at the moment? That would be very helpful. Stakeholders,
Hey,
scope.
you can see these,
Yes,
right?
I
Okay.
can see it. I can see it. Thank you, Ryan.
The green
Communication,
on.
sponsor,
Mhm.
resources. Oh, yes. Stakeholders, ownership. Oh, for sure. Yes, 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 yes. That's very good. So I have to tell you that I asked exactly the same question to more than 50 project and program managers for the last 2 to 3 weeks when I was preparing this workshop or this lunch and learn. And the answers are pretty similar to yours. I have the list here in front of me, and I can tell you they mentioned frequent misunderstandings, silos, unclear vision and goals, resistant to change, timelines, resources, exactly the same thing that you are also doing here, right? So I did something. I'm sorry, I did something to, and now I close the chat and I really need the chat. So let me just go back to the chat because I want to make sure that obviously I have, okay, I have it now. Perfect. So I asked this question and this is the list, but there are 3 major ones that I can see also in the chat that you mentioned a lot, that were the most mentioned ones in the answers that I got from those 50 or more than 50 project and program managers. And those were, and I hope now you can see what I will be writing. So the first one was really, and not, I believe, a surprise for anyone, stakeholders. And specifically, the lack of stakeholders engagement that I saw that was the first thing that we had in the chat that was really difficulty to get the stakeholders engagement. The second one was around resources and lack of resources or resource allocation that I also saw in the chat. And the third most commented was scope, that you also have it. And here specifically around scope creep, which is very interesting because in general, all of us as project and program managers have really the same challenges. They are not the same problems because obviously each project is a different entity and unique entity because we have different people working in that project, different goals, different companies. So it's always a different entity, but the challenges are really common. The other interesting thing that I find when I ask this question is that usually people actually tell me symptoms. What I mean by this is that if we look, for example, to the list that I got from the initial project managers, I have, for example, frequent misunderstandings. The misunderstandings, they are a problem. They impact our project, obviously. But is this the real problem? I don't feel so. This is actually a symptom of something. And usually the problem is something around communication. Another example is the resistance to change. What is really behind that? It's usually we people don't like change, right? We prefer to have the same routine and do the things as we usually do it. And we know that works. So we don't like change. The other thing is the constant issues with deliverables that I got as well. And that is usually a symptom or a sign of something that is wrong with maybe lack of quality process in place, or can be lack of motivation from the team, for example. So what I mean by this is that usually the first challenge and the first problem that we think about are actually symptoms of something that is deeper. And we then need to understand what are exactly those. How do we identify these challenges are very intuitively, right? We don't really think too much. It's like, oh, I feel that something is here and it's wrong. So I want to share with you a few tips that actually, how can we try to understand if something is wrong in our projects? And how I start doing is actually analyzing data. And that data can be metrics, can be, can be so many metrics, so KPIs, obviously, can be data, can be any kind of information that we get and collect. And it is important, for example, when we look to metrics, that we don't look to numbers only, but we have a context behind those. So we compare, we understand the environment, and we understand exactly what those numbers mean. The other thing that we can do to try to understand those signs and the symptoms is observe. And observe really with attention in paying attention to things, because we need to observe behaviors, we need to observe events. A very typical, I would say, event that can happen is conflict between team members. We need to pay attention to those. Can be nothing, can really be a symptom of something that is behind it and the problem to solve. So when we observe, we also need to listen. And we need to listen actively. We don't listen to judge or to respond. We should really listen, and we must listen to really understand the point of view from the other person. And here it is important also that not only we listen to the words, but we also try to understand what are those expressions that I know in the virtual world is sometimes very different or difficult because cameras are off. But we need to make an effort to have the cameras on. We need to understand the tone of voice, and we need to read between the lines. That is really important to identify signs or symptoms that can be around. And the last thing that I want to share about this one that is a different word is intuition. And listen, I'm a very logical person, and it took me a while to actually get to this one and really trust my intuition. But I really believe that as project managers, we need to trust our intuition. We are the ones with the knowledge about the project. We are the ones in the middle of the project. We are the ones that know the stakeholders, our team, that have the overall view of the project. So we know when something is wrong. It's like, I feel that something is wrong, right? So we need to trust our intuition. That is really important to know how to do that. So with these four, and applying these four tips, or these four steps, if we want to call them, we will identify a list of signs or challenges or symptoms. But it is hard with these to really understand the real problem behind the challenges. It's like, for example, when I have a headache, right? The pain will impact me, and it's a problem for me for sure, because I cannot concentrate, I cannot work. But is that the real problem? If I take a pill to actually, is that treating me the problem? Probably not, right? Because it can be because I'm tired. So the solution would be really to rest and not take a pill, although the pill will help me, obviously, to rest. But what I'm trying to say is that it's interesting when we ask what are the challenges to people, what we usually say is what we hear, what we observe. Those are the challenges, what we feel directly. And those are the challenges and those are the symptoms. But we need to start really investigating and going deeper on those to try to understand where the real problem is. Because the chaos is there, the disorder is there, and we really need to understand where the problems are. So here is when I have another question for you. So if you please could write in the chat, let me just share with you the three most common ones. So stakeholder resources and score. Let's pick now the stakeholder one, because was really the most common one. And if we think about this one that was the lack of stakeholder engagement, I would like to ask you.
Yes, I was agreeing. I was going to say that would be a good one to talk to.
Perfect, because it's really the most common one, right? And stakeholders is really a tricky one. So
and
I would
what was
love
the question
to hear,
again?
Yeah, so the question is, why do we experience, or why do you believe we experience lack of stakeholder engagement in our projects? If you please can write in the chat. Capacity. They don't fully understand why we're doing the project. Okay, lack of priority. Yes, too many things to do. That's true. More things. Aren't interested. Okay, lack of information on how it will work towards their benefits. Too many projects, so priorities here as well. Perhaps it's technically a part of their job description. They are doing this in addition to their regular job. Okay, so maybe time management here as well. Priorities also aligned with this one. Feeling like they aren't being heard, so they stop contributing. Lack of stakeholder understanding of projects. Okay, very good ones. So if we think about the stakeholder engagement, and let me just add maybe a few ones, can be also maybe something around communications. Problem with communications, do you feel that can contribute as well for the lack of engagement? Okay, good. Do you believe that somehow can also mean something around the leadership? Maybe an inspiring leader. And here I'm talking not only about the stakeholders, but really about the project manager as well. That we as project managers are not doing something that inspire the stakeholders and they actually lose the interest on the project. Okay, good, good. So let's go deeper now on this one. Okay, because we need to also to self-reflect on ourselves, and that's a good thing to do. If we think now about the leadership, what do you believe it's the problem around the leadership? If we feel that we as project managers are not doing something to actually bring that engagement from this leadership, what do you feel it is the problem? What probably are we doing wrong? Give me just a few lines about this one, please. Not listening well enough. So again, a problem with comms. Perfect. Yes. Listening,
Not communicating
communication.
well, listening issues.
Very good.
Mm.
There is one that actually I have to tell you that I hear a lot and I actually bring to you, that is not being strategic enough. Is that strategic thinking? Don't you hear about this one? Sometimes, oh, we need more strategic thinking on this one. There is another one that you are not, so you are saying communication may be lead by example, not leveraging influence where we don't have authority. That's a very good one. Not being assertive, exactly. There is another one that came a lot on conversations that I have with many different project managers. Building relationships is a very good one. And another one that I want to, sorry, Brian.
I was going to say, meeting the leaders at the right level. And maybe that's where you're going with strategic thinking, is oftentimes they don't have the time or patience or maybe the care for the nth detail. And so you've got to meet them where they're at.
Completely. And meet them and meet also the company objectives, for example, right? So we really need to align all of this. Exactly. There is another one that I hear a lot from project managers as well, that I believe it's a problem and can actually impact the way project managers do or lead the projects, that is the lack of confidence. And it's interesting because there are many people actually referring this. You didn't refer this, but lack of confidence is a lot. And that can be because so many different reasons. Can be because it's a junior person, can be because imposter syndrome that obviously we have. So there are so many different things. So everything here to tell you that when we start hearing about challenges, we should go deeper and try really to understand what's going on, to really identify the real problems. So I want now to share with you a framework that I use, sorry, not this button. It's a framework that I use and a few steps that I use that I have been using and I've been successful with these. Needs to be tailored. The steps are more or less linear and can be applied to any situation, but obviously what we do in each step needs to be adapted to the reality where we are. But when I have a problem, or I can start seeing these signs and these problems, what I start doing is defining the root causes. So really go down to these real problems. You see what we did, right? We start with one general question, and then I ask you more questions, and we go deeper and we go deeper. So we will start seeing really the problems. These can be just questions. There are many techniques that we can use for these, but can be just conversations with stakeholders, with people that are really involved in the project and really listen. You remember that we talked here about analyze, observe, listen, and intuition. So it's really try to apply these and identify those challenges. So root causes, it's really important. And then the second step that I take is really break the problem into smaller problems. Oh, break, not break. Break the problem. Problems are more and more complex and huge. It's crazy, right? Nowadays, you don't really have small problems. Usually you have big and complex problems. And it can be really difficult and overwhelming to try to solve those problems at once. So if we try to break down those in smaller parts, are much easier to plan, much easier to find solutions, much quicker to implement something and be able to celebrate as well. So there are many advantages to actually break a complex problem in smaller parts. There is a note here that I want to leave with you that is when you do that, pay attention to the dependencies. We may have parts of a bigger problem that actually have dependencies. So in this case, we need to make sure that or we put them together as one problem to solve, or when we discuss the solutions for one problem, we need to keep in mind that the other one has dependencies. So this is something that we need to pay attention when we break these problems. And then what we need to do, the third step, is really prioritization. Priority, okay, not an easy word. How I do these, there are plenty techniques as well to do these. I like to use the Moscow. I believe it's very easy to do these with the Moscow method. I'm sure that you heard about that, or the impact effort matrix as well. But it's really important that we have prioritization. And why is that important? You remember, in coming back to the initial, where do I have these? Actually has a line here that should be here. But you remember that we started by one challenge that was the stakeholder engagement or lack of stakeholder engagement. And then we identified more problems here. In the majority of the times, a challenge behind has actually more than one real problem to solve. And then we went deeper and we actually identified more and even more with the ones that you shared with me in the chat. So at some point, these breakdown can actually bring and result in a big list. So it is important that we prioritize that list because we won't be able to actually solve all of that at once. Problems are usually something that we do in parallel with the plan that we have to develop something. And I talk about development because I'm really around software development, but anything that we really need to do as part of the scope and deliver. And problems are usually parallel things that we need to fix. So it's really important that we prioritize. We won't be able to allocate resources or all the resources to solve the problem unless the problem is so huge that our solution is actually stop everything to just fix that problem, right? But hopefully that's not the case. So when we arrive to the end of these 3 steps, what we have is a list of the problems that we need to solve. And a very good list, because they are not only probably small problems, we hope, and we actually have a ranking. Try not to use this kind of prioritization that is 1, 1, 2, 2. It's not really a prioritization. 1, 2, 3, that is a prioritization. And there is actually a funny game that I sometimes do about prioritization that if you want at the end, I can share with you as well. That is usually funny to just bring our stakeholders to try to prioritize, because when you ask people, so what is really important? Everything is important, right? So that's a funny game that I usually do. So once we have our list, then we need to go one by one and really try to understand how to solve our problems. How I do this now? So I do an analysis as well here. And what I analyze here is data and all the information that I can collect. You remember that I started this presentation by telling you that I was asking the same question to more than 50 project managers. I asked you here as well. I start asking more questions. That is all information that is very useful for us as a project manager to understand where the problems are. So what I do is try to collect as much as I can. I do some research. Don't overreact with this as well, because it can be overwhelming. Try to do as much as you can, but in a way that is useful and enough for what you need. And then try to understand what works and doesn't work. Once we have that analysis done, what we need to do is really identify solutions. And when I say what we need to do, if it is a problem around project management, we are the right people to obviously solve and find solutions for this. But usually the problems are not really around project management or a technique or a deliverable, a document, not really about those, are actually problems that we need the teams or stakeholders to solve. So bring your teams, bring your experts to really try to solve these or find solutions with this. Again, there are many techniques that you can use here. I can also share with you. My favorite one here is brainstorming. I prefer to just ask questions to people. Can be one-to-ones, can be groups, depending on the size of the problem, what the kind of problem. I already solve problems just with one-to-ones, or sometimes I really need to put everyone in a room for 2 or 3 days to just solve problems. But those are really big and complex problems. But brainstorming is what I usually like. It is important with these solutions to bring also pros and cons. And why is that? Because the next step is to really make a decision. And this is really important, to make decisions. I'm not saying that, again, we project managers are the one making decisions, but we need to have a decision-making process in place that really states who makes what decisions, that when we arrive to this point, we know exactly who do we need to reach out and who is the owner of that decision in order to really have that decision made. Fixing problems require time, requiring resources. We already talked, or I said, not talked, I said that was really something that probably was implemented in parallel of all the other stuff that we need to do. So there is another step now that is really important, that is review our plan and our timeline. I'm sorry, this letter and in the way I'm writing, but my pen actually broke, and now this one is a temporary one, and it's not so easy to write in the tablet with this one. So review the plan and review the timeline. It's so important. We do a bit of this when we define solutions with pros and cons, because one of the things to make the decision is probably try to understand where are we at with our plan and our timeline. But it's really important that once we make a decision and we know exactly the solution to be implemented, that we go and revisit that. And not only revisit the plan and timeline itself, but try also to understand if the approach, the strategy that you identified at the beginning of the project needs to be aligned again. There are a few problems that actually impact the way we go in the direction that we go with the project. So that's really important to check as well. And once we have these defined, what is really, really important, and we talked already a lot about, is to communicate. We need to communicate all of these to our stakeholders. We need to have one message. And when I say one message, is not one message to everyone. We usually need to tailor the message, and that refers to a good communicator, but is a unique message. Everyone needs to understand what's happening, and what's happening is one thing, right? So it's a unique message tailored to different stakeholders. But we don't fix problems without the last step, that is implementing the solution and monitor. And I cannot stress enough how important it is to monitor here the implementation of the problem. And you know why? Because most part of the times, unfortunately, the solution and the implementation of a problem will actually create more problems. And in that case, what we need to do is go back, revisit again the first 3 steps, include those problems in our list, reprioritize the list, and then go again and do this for the next problem. So it is really important that we do this. I believe we don't need to revisit the steps, but if you want, ask me, and more than happy to revisit the steps. What I want to tell you still about this framework that is very, very important is that don't do this alone. We are not the experts in the project. We are responsible and accountable for the projects the majority of the times, at least responsible. Accountability, if we have a sponsor, should be the sponsor. But don't do these because we are not really the experts. So in all these steps, please involve your team, the stakeholders, and the sponsor. Am I telling you to involve them all the time? No, depending on the problem, we need to involve the key stakeholders that are more engaged with that area of the problem, a few team members that probably are more engaged with the development of that area and the problem itself. If it is a small problem, we probably don't need to involve the sponsor. FYI, it's always nice. But if it is a big problem that may impact the timeline, may impact the strategy, may impact the goals, for sure, the sponsor should be the first one to know. So don't forget and don't really leave them alone. Not only because it is important that they know and it's important that they are involved, but if they are involved, they are committed. If they are committed, it's much easier to actually solve the problem, to get their support, to get resources, if it is from the sponsor, and to really be successful in when we solve these problems. So it's really important that we really bring the stakeholders with us. In order to follow this framework, and if I'm going too fast, please tell me, but I'm looking to the time and I'm conscious of the time and I really want to really leave time for Q&A. In order to follow this framework and to really be able to solve problems, what we really need as project managers is to develop our technical skills. We need to have expertise in project management, right? What I mention here is that we need to know the processes, we need to know the deliverables that we need to have. I'm talking about things like the project scope or the project's charter, the risk management process, the RACI metrics, all of these good things that we need to know as project managers. Somehow we will need to apply them. Depending on the problem, we will need to apply some of them. Probably not of them, but we will need some of them. However, even to apply these technical skills, what we really need as well is the soft skills. And here is where I call, and the PMI also call, the power skills. And the power skills that are always involved in this process of solving problems and moving from disorder to order are, in my opinion, 5. So power skills for PMI are 4. And those are problem solving, communications, leadership, strategic thinking. Those are the 4 that the PMI lists as power skills. I would add another one that I feel that are fundamental for us as project managers, and that one is growth mindset. Without a growth mindset, it's really hard to actually make this happen. So I feel that not only technical skills, but soft skills, the combination of these two are really what make us be able to solve the problems and move on to the next one and to the next one.
Could you delve in a
So,
bit more to
yeah,
the delve in a bit more to
yes.
what do you mean by growth mindset? Or maybe you're going to go there next.
I will go a bit, but yes, of course. So growth mindset for me here is that we need to be flexible. We need to embrace challenges. If we are the project manager, try to do always the same thing because it worked in the previous projects. If we don't like changes, if we don't embrace challenges, we won't succeed in solving problems because all of this is important. So when I say growth mindset is really being flexible, adjustable, continue learning, continue improving all the time. That is what I mean by growth mindset. That, listen,
Okay.
all of these skills are really complementing each other, right? So to be a good leader, we need to be a very good communicator. To be a very good problem solver, we need to have strategic thinking and have the growth mindset. All of these are so connected, all of them, and connected with the technical skills as well, right? So great question. Thank you, Brian. But we are talking about chaos and we are talking about problem solving. So there are 3 areas in problem solving that I really believe a project manager should be keen to develop and should be really good in those 3 areas to be able to solve these problems and really move from chaos to order. And those 3 for me is we need to be critical thinkers. You remember that when I asked you questions, I continue asking questions. I could just challenge your questions, right? It's don't assume things. Continue asking, continue be very critical. When you analyze data and all the information that you have, think about that in a critical way. Don't just consume things, really challenge those things. That's for me a must if we want to solve problems. The other one is we need to be creative. We need to be a creative person. And again, it's not because we are solving the problems directly, but we can ask the questions to make our teams and the stakeholders to actually find innovative solutions and be creative with that. Why don't we try this? I heard about this solution in another project. Is this possible to do here to solve this problem? Be creative, bringing different things. And to this, you need to continue learning. Again, growth mindset here in the middle, right? And the third one that for me is fundamental for a project manager is to be resilient. We really need to be resilient. We need to make sure that we navigate all these challenges effectively. And for that, resilience is a must. And now I'm changing from these to actually my slides again, because now I really want to share with you a quote that I find very interesting and resonates a lot with me. around project management. And the code is this one. Life is not about how many times you fall down. It's about how many times you get back up. Really sounds cool, right? And is really what I believe happens with us as project managers all the time. We have these problems. Oh gosh, I'm so overwhelmed, so busy trying to find out this one. And then we solve that one. So we go down, we feel bad, but then we solve it and we just move to the next one. So I really like this. I resonate a lot with this quote that I wanted to bring it to you. Finally, how do we prevent future chaos? For me, the technical skills that I shared with you and soft skills or power skills are exactly the same that we need across the project. If we are setting up a project, if we are moving from chaos to order, if we are preventing future chaos. The difference is the mindset that we have when we try to think about these things. And what I mean is when we move from chaos to order, our mindset is a reactive. We are in reactive mode. We have a problem, we need to solve it. When we are preventing, we are actually in proactive mode, which is much better than being in reactive mode. Sometimes we need to be both at the same time, even. But for me, what is different is really the mindset, is not the kind of skills. And just as a summary of what we have done, or I've shared with you, what we really need to do in all this process to move from chaos to order is really be the project manager that knows our stuff, right? We need to have the technical skills. I'm just listing here a few. There are so many others. Project managers are amazing with the amount of things that they do. But these ones are really the ones that I would like to highlight as important for moving from chaos and preventing chaos in the future. And that is having an adjustable plan and timeline and adjust as much as you need and required, always align with your goals. The risk assessment. Risks are really helpful to identify challenges. If a risk has a contingency, we have solved our problem. We have a solution, right? We don't need to go through all that process. But if we didn't identify the risk, we don't have a contingency plan, then we have a problem and we have the chaos. So risks are really important and risk assessment for sure. Change control process. We cannot control changes. Life happens. Projects always have problems. Stakeholders have different ideas. You mentioned that we cannot control it, but we can track it. And that is what we should do all the time. So document all of that, have a very good change control process. Meetings, we all love meetings or we hate meetings. Don't do meetings just because we believe that the best practice is to have a weekly meeting for status. Just do it if you have a purpose for that. Otherwise, you will lose your stakeholders. Really important that the meetings are done, but really address what is important. Like, for example, the stakeholders' concerns. That is really important to address. And the last point that I have here is in thinking about the framework that I just shared with you, one of the points is decisions. If we don't document those decisions, we may have problems in the future. Remember that the problem can actually generate more problems. If we have the decision documented, we can actually go back and really understand where the problem is coming from, and it's much easier to solve. So really document your decisions. That's really important. So this is around the technical skills. Summary around soft skills. Again, the five soft skills or power skills that I was talking about. And here is where I go a bit deeper. So problem solving. We need a way, we need a skill that allow us to actually solve all these challenges that we have. We have every day, almost every day, we have a problem to solve. So really important to develop our problem solving skills. Communications. My question here is, where don't we need to communicate? Always. We need to communicate everything for everything, right? A deliverable that we do, we need to communicate it. Is a document is important, we need to communicate. We are solving a problem, we need to communicate. We need to communicate everything. We need to communicate with everyone in the project. So communication is really, really important. Leadership. We want to be the leader that the stakeholders want to work with. When I was actually asking the initial question to project managers, I remember there was one saying, listen, my main problem is actually these parallel conversations. They just do their own meetings, their own conversations. I'm not part of it. I'm not invited. I don't know what's going on. We don't want to be that leader. We want to be the leader that people come to us and share what's going on. So leadership is really fundamental. Strategic thinking. So the alignment between the project goals, the company goals, alignment of everyone, trying to define a strategy and an approach for the project that actually result on and achieve the goals that we want. And finally, the growth mindset. And we talked already a bit about these. So flexibility, adaptability, it's really, really important. Just a few tips. I know that I wanted to have time for Q&A. Just a few tips. I don't go deeper on these. Question assumptions. Don't assume anything. Ask everything. Active listening to really understand. Reflective practice. I'm not talking about really big retros that lessons learned are important, but just try to understand what's working, not working from a project management perspective. That already helps a lot. Open communication, we touched already in communication. Stress management, really important. Not talking again about huge meditations, not really, but have breaks. Take time to focus on something, on problems. Really focus on it. Take time, block your calendar for that, and build strong relationships. I cannot stress how important it is, but you know about this one. This is a triangle that actually I developed to assess the power skills. We are not going through these now. It's not the goal of our lunch and learn, but I want to share with you and give you something. So a gift for you. That is, I'm hosting a workshop about the same topic, that is Conquer Project Chaos, that is deeper than this one because we only had 50 minutes more or less. So if you want to register, please feel free to scan the QR code or go directly to raquelhorta.ie and you will find more information about the workshop and a form where you can register there. So the workshop was on the 22nd of October. We will go through these, but a bit deeper with more assessments, more discussion, because here we couldn't really discuss too much. And finally, one last question, because I'm really keen on continuous development, continuous improvement, and I would love to hear your feedback about this topic and this presentation. So if you could actually write in the chat what you thought about this one, would be very helpful for me, that I can really improve the presentation. Constructive feedback, honest feedback is what I'm looking for. And with this question, if you can write in the chat, I will just end my presentation. So if you want to connect with me, this is my profile, LinkedIn profile. Please feel free to send me a connection. It's always great to connect with other project managers. And time for Q&A.
Hey, Raquel, would you mind putting up that QR code again? Or going back a couple slides? I wasn't fast enough to capture it.
Oh, sorry. I was fast, probably too fast.
Okay, I got it. Thank you. And so you're offering another session?
Yes, will be 90 minutes.
Okay.
Yes, will be about the same topic, but is deeper. We'll go deeper because we will have more time, and we will go through the assessment of the power skills there as well. So feel free to attend. More than happy to have you all there.
Okay.
And are there any questions?
Well, you're getting some feedback too in regards,
yes,
so I want to be
great.
sure that you see that.
Thank you.
I had a question.
Visualization. Yes, Brian, I was just reading the visualization. Yes, I'm a visual person, so I really like to write and visualize things. I prefer than actually have the slides. Seems a bit bored for me, the slides. So that's why I've tried to do this. Thank you for that feedback. Brian, you were about to ask me something.
You had talked about in the section about being proactive, prevent future chaos. You had talked about continuous risk assessment,
Yes.
which I agree with. I'm just kind of if you could give like a couple minutes, just how do you approach that continuous risk assessment? And the reason I ask it is sometimes I just feel like pushback from project stakeholders. It's like, we've already talked about this. Why are we covering it again? But tell
Oh,
us more.
yes.
What's your approach there?
So I have an approach that is, I don't talk about risks with my stakeholders, which is a very strange thing because usually the best practice say you need to talk about risk management, even have a dedicated meeting to actually talk about risks. I don't mention usually too much the risk word. So I just
Okay.
talk with them. I do sessions at the beginning of the project to, let's imagine that we are at the end of the project. How do we actually see this working? If doesn't work and we don't achieve our goals, what actually are the problems? And that became my list of
Hmm.
risks. And then throughout the project, I review those risks. And if I believe that some kind of risk is actually somehow changing, or we have new risks, I continue those conversations. I usually use meetings about different topics to understand where the risks are. Again, for me,
Mm-hmm.
and for my experience, stakeholders have really a problem with the risk word. So if
Mm-hmm.
we actually refer risks a lot, they don't want to talk about that. So I try just to have a conversation with them where I try to understand where the risks are. And if I really believe it's a risk, I then have a conversation. So how do you believe we actually could find a solution for this? And that solutions or those solutions became my contingency plan.
Okay.
That is
It's
how I
more,
approach risk.
okay, I like that. And it's about listening too, and just kind of what your stakeholders or your sponsor are telling you, listening,
Yes.
and then
Yep.
interpreting that into, okay, they're really talking about a risk here, or
Exactly.
okay, okay.
Even more because when we talk about risks, the majority of people go actually to issues. There is a bit of confusion what a risk and an issue
Mm-hmm.
is, and people sometimes don't really differentiate both. So it's hard for them. There is another reason also that I do this. Stakeholders are usually very focused on an area of a project. The project manager is the one that actually understands the majority of the areas and can connect the dots. So it's much
Mm-hmm.
easier for us to talk with different stakeholders and connect those dots and say, okay, I can understand this is a risk. So then I talk with another stakeholder and I will complement information around that risk. So that's why I do it that. It usually
Mm.
works.
Yeah, makes sense.
And we need to continue doing this all the time, right? We cannot do this at the beginning of the project and stop. We need to continue doing this throughout the project.
Mm.
Good
Excellent.
question.
Thank you.
More questions? We have more questions.
We have a couple of minutes left if anyone wants to raise a question. You can use the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, I can have Dana take you give you audio, if that would be easier.
Yeah. If the QR code is not working, the link that I have at the bottom, so www.raquelhorta.ie should go to the same place. So don't worry with that.
Okay.
Just looking to how do you track, monitor those side conversations so that those decisions are communicated to the project team? Very good question. I believe is really around building strong relationships with the team and the stakeholders and really develop our leadership skills. They need to understand that we are there to help them. We are not there to find more problems. Um, if I actually avoid to talk about risks, I actually avoid also to talk about technicalities of project management, project charter, um, project plan. They usually people associate project plan with a timeline anyway. array symmetrics. People usually don't understand that language. That is our language, right? So I try to avoid these big words, project management words. And in order to actually create relationships, I do the same. I'm there, I'm the leader, but I'm there to actually help people. I'm there and they need to understand that I need to understand and know about things. So if something like this happen and can happen, if something, a parallel conversation happens, I try then to approach the people that were in that meeting and try to explain that it is important for me to understand because they know a bit about the project, but they know that area of the project. We have several different areas and we need to connect them. And I'm the person connecting those things. I'm the person bringing the teams and all the stakeholders together to actually connect everything that we deliver something. So it is important for them to understand that. And then is really building relationships. I have one-to-ones with teams. I have one-to-ones with key stakeholders to really build the relationship. And at some point, there is a tricky line here, I would say, because at some point, you may end up being the person that they come for everything. You don't want to do that as well, because otherwise you don't do anything else. But be the person that they want to talk to, even if they have the parallel conversation, that after that they will come to you and say, listen, we had this technical meeting, was too technical for you, we thought, but there are these points that are important to share with you. So it's really important to have that relationship and highlight what is important for you as well and communicate, give feedback around that. That is really how I track those side conversations and have these particular people that you actually connect very well to also tell you what's going on, the signs, to learn the signs and the symptoms that you can actually feel. It would be fun to hear some actual case studies or examples. Yes, we didn't have the time to go deeper on these. That would be very interesting as well. Any other question? Trying to look to the chat, but I don't really see more. I know that we are at the top of the hour. I'm sorry. I thought that would be really quicker, that we had more time for Q&A.
This is
I
good.
hope it.
Thanks,
I really
Raquel.
hope that was useful for everyone. I will share Brian with you. Brian, can we get the chats? I would love to get this chat and this feedback for analysis and really have more data to understand
Yeah.
what's going on.